Well, as we heard yesterday, solar power isn't exactly the silver bullet, that sustainable energy source it's been sold as. And it seems that there is more bad news on the horizon when it comes to our efforts to cut emissions. A report the government's Interim Climate Change Committee was meant to drop yesterday has been held back for another 2 weeks. And joining us to tell us why is energy expert and New Zealand Initiative Research Fellow Matt Burgess. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning.
Give us an insight on why they've held this report back.
Well, this report from the Interim Committee on Climate Change is one of the things they've been asked to do is look at the effect of the government's 100% renewable electricity policy. That report's told the government that the policy will increase the price of electricity quite substantially, 14% for households, 39% for industry. It'll also say that the policy will have only a limited impact on emissions at all. So it's a very expensive way to cut emissions. So what this means in the end is that there are alternative approaches the government can take to achieve its emissions targets, but this 100% renewables electricity policy really is a very expensive way to achieve not very much for the environment.
You're actually an author of some research that you've done yourself that basically says the same thing, that the government almost needs to drop its policy of 100% renewable energy.
Well, that's right. Every electricity system has a speed limit when it comes to the share of renewables. Renewable energy is great, but every electricity system, there's a point at which more renewables adds costs but no benefits. In New Zealand, that speed limit's very high. It's about 95%. And past that, what you find is that you have to build an awful lot of solar or wind or geothermal or hydro to meet the last few percent of demand. And we're talking about peaks in demand. So for the sake of one or two coal or gas plants, you have to build perhaps thousands of wind turbines or millions of solar panels. So it becomes very expensive. And for the sake of one or two of those fossil fuel powered stations, you can avoid a huge investment in those alternative energy sources. Look, there's nothing wrong with renewables. Renewables are great. 83% of our electricity comes from renewables today, and our electricity is affordable. So New Zealand shows that renewable energy works. The problem with this policy is that you need about 5% of your electricity that has the reliability of gas or coal generation, and this policy gets rid of that, and that's why it's so expensive.
And saying that, the 5% of energy that you're talking about is meant to be peak energy, but the Huntly power station is going 24/7 basically. It's kind of running as a power station rather than just a peak power station. How can we change that?
Well, part of the reason Huntly's been running so much lately is because there has been an outage in gas supplies at the Pauakura field in Taranaki. So coal at Huntly has actually been used to provide security of supply, to step in when other things in the system fail. One of the things that the report from the Interim Committee on Climate Change is going to say to the government, I think based on a presentation given by the chair of the committee 2 weeks ago and based on discussions I've had with officials, is that 100% renewables will actually increase the rate of blackouts. You're going to see a lower security of supply with a very high share of renewables. That's what we're seeing in South Australia. They had a huge blackout there 3 years ago. Other countries are seeing fluctuations in electricity security of supply. So one of the benefits of coal and gas is that they're very cheap insurance policies, and it's good to have that source of security there just in case it's needed. And one of the costs of the policy is that it gets rid of that insurance policy for our system.
Are you saying that 100% renewable energy is unattainable?
No, it's certainly attainable if you're prepared to spend the money. So if you're prepared to wear a 39% increase in the price of electricity, you can do it. It's just a question of how many wind turbines and solar panels you're willing to build to cover what's lost from that last coal or gas station.
You're advocating for the government to strengthen the emissions trading scheme in order to get to this goal. Do you have too much faith in the market? Isn't the market what has got us here in the first place?
Well, it has. I mean, the market, in the end, we've had a hands-off approach to electricity for 30 years. It's given us world-class clean electricity and affordable electricity. One of the things we did in our report that we released last month was to look around the world and compare the performance of government winner-picking programs like 100% renewable electricity, like electric vehicle subsidies. And we compared the performance of those winner-picking policies to market-based approaches like emissions trading scheme. And what we found was that the evidence suggested a 10-to-1 performance gap. In other words, for every tonne of carbon that you cut using policies like 100% renewables, you can get 10 tonnes by using an emissions trading scheme. So we'd like to see the government step back from this 100% renewable electricity policy. We support the intent. It's just a question of how you get there. By far the better approach that the government can take is to continue strengthening the emissions trading scheme we have here in New Zealand. The government's already made announcements on that. We support that. They should keep going because it's by far the better approach for dealing with a problem like emissions.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. That's Matt Burgess.